This is WNYC, FM, HD, and AM New York.
This is all of it. WNYC. Saoirse Ronan stars in the new movie The Outrun, in which a young woman struggling with alcoholism returns to her remote hometown to get sober. She joins us. Then for our Get Political series, we'll talk with journalist Paola Ramos, whose new book, The Defectors, explores the rise of far-right ideologies among Latinos. Then Daniel Kurtzleben, NPR's political correspondent, talks about the so-called manosphere and the political impacts of popular influencers. And singer-songwriter Ludolo drops by to play some new music in our studios and preview their shows tonight at Brooklyn Steel. We will get to all of it. I'm Allison Stewart, and I will meet you on the other side of the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The U.S. believes Iran is preparing to launch an attack against Israel. NPR's Asma Khalid reports this comes against the backdrop of rising tensions between Iran and Israel in recent weeks.
The Biden administration says it has indications that Iran is preparing to imminently launch a ballistic missile attack against Israel. That's according to a senior White House official speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss security issues. The official said the U.S. is actively supporting preparations to defend Israel against this attack. This could be akin to the assistance offered in April when the U.S. helped intercept a series of Iranian missiles toward Israel. The U.S. official warned a direct military attack from Iran against Israel will carry, quote, severe consequences for Iran. This all comes as Israel has launched a ground invasion of southern Lebanon, targeting the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah. Asma Khalid, NPR News.
The vice presidential debate takes place tonight in New York. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Ohio U.S. Senator J.D. Vance will each introduce themselves to voters who will be tuning in from around the country. As NPR's Tamara Keith reports, each candidate will also attempt to disqualify his opponent.
Because there isn't another debate scheduled for the presidential candidates this year, the vice presidential debate could get outsized attention. Vance has been practicing with Minnesota Congressman Tom Emmer, standing in for Walz, while Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, in a personal capacity, has been playing the role of Vance in Walz's debate prep sessions. Both campaigns are playing up their opponents' debate skills in an effort to set expectations. Walz and Vance were both relatively unknown on the national stage before being nominated for VP, so this debate is the best chance yet for them to tell their stories to voters. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
Storm recovery in multiple states continues today. In East Tennessee, a plastics company is defending its actions after workers were trapped in flooding from Helene. NPR's Jennifer Ludden reports several employees are missing or confirmed dead.
Impact Plastics says it dismissed employees early following intense rain last Friday because its parking lot flooded and the plant lost power. But relatives of some Latino workers say their loved ones did not get the message. They held up photos of the missing at a local news conference asking for more information. In a press release, Impact Plastics says at no time were employees told they would be fired if they left the building, and that message was delivered by a bilingual employee. It also called for help, and a National Guard helicopter rescued 5 workers. The company says it is devastated by the tragic loss of great employees. Jennifer Ludden, NPR News, Newport, Tennessee.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
And this is WNYC in New York. I'm David First, 66 degrees, 4 minutes after 12 o'clock. No contract, no work. That's what striking workers at Port Newark are saying today during their first day on the picket line. Thousands of longshoremen across the country are stopping work after their contracts expired at midnight. Their demands to port officials are centered on concerns about automation and wages. The impact could be felt quickly. Experts say supply chains will be strained in New York City if the strike lasts more than a few days. The United States Maritime Alliance says they've already traded counteroffers with the Longshoremen's Union. Governor Hochul says the state is working around the clock to ensure grocery stores and medical facilities have what they need. Every October, hundreds of spaces around New York City that are normally private open up to the public for one weekend. It's called Open House New York, and the lineup for this year is out today. From October 18th to the 20th, you can visit spaces like the inside of the city's largest power plant in Queens, or go onto the rooftop of the Nighthawk movie theater in Park Slope. Many of the spaces are free, though some $6 reservations are required for some sites. They are available on a first-come, first-served basis. You can see some top picks for this year at our news website, Gothamist. An earlier version of this story misstated the pricing for some events. 66 degrees right now. It will be mostly cloudy today. We're expecting a high around 70 this afternoon. Tonight it stays mostly cloudy, a low of 58. This is WNYC.
Support for NPR comes from Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs, for chefs, and designed for restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com.
This is All of It. I'm Allison Stewart, live from the WNYC studios in Soho. Thank you for spending part of your day with us. I'm really grateful you're here. And thanks to all of you who came out last night for our first Get Lit conversation of the fall. Big thanks to Eric Larson and Sons of Town Hall. You'll hear the radio edit on Friday. And a reminder, this coming Thursday, schools are closed, so we're hosting our first Get Little conversation of the season. It's a book conversations for kids. And we have a very special guest, Questlove, musician, filmmaker, and a whole lot more. He's written a book about fostering creativity and inspiration in kids. And he joins me this Thursday at noon to talk about it. And your kid could have the opportunity to ask Questlove a question about creativity. That's coming up at noon on Thursday. Your kid, Questlove, together on the weekend. And speaking of Get Lit, on today's show, we're going to get political with Paola Ramos, whose new book is called The Defectors. It's talking about Latinos drawn to the far right. We'll also talk about the political influencers of the Manosphere. It's a network of male-directed media. And then later, we're going to hear some live music from our studios with singer-songwriter Ludlow. That is the plan. So let's get this started with a trip to the Isles of Scotland. In the new film, The Outrun, Saoirse Ronan plays a young woman struggling with addiction who finds healing on the islands where she was raised. Rona has left the remote Orkney Islands off the coast of Scotland for a life of excitement and partying in London. She falls in love with a great new guy, but soon her drinking escalates from club antics to a serious problem. After one drunken night that leads to a dangerous encounter, Rona decides to get sober. And to do that, she heads back to the Orkneys, to her mom, who has embraced religion to help her cope with her daughter's addiction, and to her dad, a farmer who struggles with his own mental illness. At first, Rona chafes at the isolation of the islands. There aren't many young people in the Orkneys, and she's still fighting to stay sober. But after a while, the sea, the birds, the seals, the lambs, and even the seaweed come to play a part in Rona's recovery. The Outrun is based on the memoir of the same name by Amy Liptrot, and it's in theaters on Friday, October 4th. And joining me now is Saoirse Ronan. Hi, Saoirse. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
So I understand. I'm good, first of all. I understand that you discovered this memoir and had the idea to play this part during the pandemic. How did you come across Amy Liptrot's book?
She had written the book about 10 years ago, and my husband, who is a very proud Scotsman, had done a bit of research when he had gone to visit the Orkney Islands a few years before on writers who had come from the place. So he had the book, but he hadn't read it, and it was on our bookshelf while we were in lockdown, and of course we were, really making a dent in our library, just as everyone else was. And he read it in a couple of days, just totally fell in love with it, and knew that it would be something that I would respond to. It's a particular subject matter that's very personal to me. And so he sent it to me, and he said, "This is the next role I think you should play." And I agreed, and we didn't know necessarily how we were going to do it or how it was going to be developed into a film, but we knew we had to try. So yeah, that's how it all started.
Have you ever played a person who's living before?
No, I mean, unless you count Lady Bird, who's sort of based on Greta, I don't think I have, no.
So what were your concerns about playing someone still living?
That they wouldn't like what I did, that they didn't feel it was an honest representation of them or their story. I think, to my relief, what we decided on pretty early into the process was that it was important that what became Rona, but was originally Amy in our film, that the film character version of Amy felt like an evolution of who she really was. And so we made the decision to change her name to Rona, to give Amy some healthy distance from this incredibly surreal experience of a movie being made out of her life, but also for me to feel like I had agency when it came to evolving the character and being able to bring some of myself to it. We really didn't want it to feel like it was just an impersonation of Amy, and instead was our interpretation of it. So the character isn't necessarily Amy, but it's sort of a combination of who I am and Amy and Nora, our director.
Yeah, Amy Liptrot wrote in The Guardian after watching you play Rona, the way she spoke and moved channeled me. My nervous delivery and expressive hands. I was freaked out, but also immediately reassured by her talent. We had only met briefly online, but she seemed to have conjured my manner through reading my words, their rhythm and spirit embodied. When she says channeled you, that's a really interesting choice of words.
Yeah, I think that's a really wonderful way of putting it, is that it was never going to be an impersonation, because, you know, no one can do that, but the energy was there and the energy was aligned, I think, between the two of us. And, you know, that's my job, whether it's someone who's real or not. The whole part of the process is to take whatever information you can and allow that to sort of percolate until it starts to form into a person. So whether I'm creating someone who's only existed in a book, or someone who's only existed in a script, or someone who is real and standing in front of me, it's really all about that energy and the sort of the dialogue between me and it, I suppose. And the fact that Amy feels that I kind of captured that for her is obviously the biggest compliment and the biggest relief for me.
My guest is Saoirse Ronan, star of the new film The Outrun. It's about a young woman struggling with addiction who moves back home to remote Scottish islands of her childhood. So you were able to film in the Orkneys, I hope I'm saying that correctly. What is something about those islands that you really can't understand unless you've spent time there?
I think what no one can understand until they've been there is how special the people are. I've never met a group of people quite as incredible as the Orcadians. They're so kind of unique. And
there's a lot of container chassis sitting around here. I've just driven past, and there's a whole ton on the lot on my left, because the port of Newark currently has a longshoreman strike. So I have to imagine that there are both containers and chassis sitting around all over this area right now that would not normally be there.
An earlier version of it. So its identity has sort of solidified, and they really kind of know who they are as a people, I think, which was really gorgeous to be around. And they were, you know, naturally very protective over their home. They'd never had anyone, apart from maybe one film production in like the 80s or the 90s, make anything there. So they'd never been represented in a film before. And I think this was a real leap of faith for them. And I think once we got them on board and they knew that we wanted to show Orkney in the best light, they just couldn't have been more giving with their time and their energy and their knowledge of the place. I also think that what we wanted to show in the Outrun is that Orkney is incredibly rich in wildlife. It's very diverse, and people will travel there in order to study seabirds in particular. There's puffin colonies, and there's lots of seals, and there's no trees really because it's too windy, so it's kind of similar to like Iceland in that way. Everyone has like 3 jobs. You know, it's a very specific place. It's very individual, and I feel very grateful to have been exposed to it.
How long were you there?
Well, we were there on and off for like a year because we did about 3 pre-shoots before we actually started principal photography. So myself and Kat Morgan, our hair and makeup designer, and Grace, our costume designer, and a couple of other people, we'd go up there, we'd shoot for a few days. We did lambing season like 6 months before we actually started the film. So a lot of what we were doing in the shoot had to sort of coincide with different calendar events that revolved around farming or wildlife, you know, so whether it was nesting season or lambing season, or we just needed a particular type of weather, we had to sort of bend to that. So we were spending a lot of time there before we actually shot there, which was great for me because I felt like I really had a connection to the place.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the different seasons that you went through, because this story really does follow Rona on this long journey of addiction. And when you think about addiction, when you research the addiction, the idea of addiction, what did you come to understand about Rona's journey?
I mean, I guess the reason why I wanted to do this is because I'd been on the receiving end of someone else's addiction, and I'd only ever felt pain and confusion because of it. And that came from the thinking that surely they can just quit and it's a choice, and if they loved me enough, they would choose me over it. And of course, that's not the situation at all. And it becomes completely a form of self-medication. And I think learning about the science behind alcoholism and addiction and the effect that it has on the brain helped me to understand it more fully and become less angry at it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because Rona tends to get angry when she drinks. She's kind of mean when she drinks, and then she wakes up and she doesn't have any memory of what has been going on. Why do you think the kind of harshness, the meanness comes out in her when she drinks?
That was a creative choice. I wanted to bring that out because that's what I had seen.
Hi, how are you?
Hey up. I've got some things for you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You can place it in park, turn it off, and step up.
Sure.